I know that Luke said to bring your charts, but it takes a long time for me to run off the chart and then do a profile. If I had gotten the charts ahead of time, I could have used one of your charts, but I had to use something that I thought was going to be important for this Uranus and Neptune in the sign of Aries. Also, I have a predictive article on Uranus and Neptune conjunction and the conjunction through the houses. So if you write to me, I can send that to you. I'm just going to give a little introduction to medical things, and then I'm going to show what I do in my courses, and it's how I do my research, what I profile a chart. I'm not a doctor, but I've been a professional astrologer since June of 1969, so I am
Nice.
really old. And but I've always studied medical subjects, and I've learned a lot over the years. And I've learned a lot through teaching, people giving testimonials and so forth. But this first part, because it's 90 minutes, I'll give you a kind of a rundown of how I teach. I have not studied with any other medical astrologer. I've developed my own techniques. And so people who are self-taught often have very original ideas. And so I feel that the root of all of your health problems are generally going to be found in cardinal, fixed, or mutable signs. And they rule certain things. Cardinals have to do with the hormonal system, adrenals, thyroid, oxytocin is under Libra. Fixed signs have to do with holding on. And well, one of the things, the first thing was fixed signs, is what Edgar Cayce used to call poor eliminations. That means you need a natural laxative. So poor eliminations is often at the root of a lot of fixed signs. And then mutable signs have to do with the lymphatic system. I'm not going to go into this in this lecture. And you may say, well, I've got something in all of those signs. How do I know? I always ask, when was the onset of those symptoms? And usually, well, when there's an onset, I usually go back 2 or 3 years before the onset because a lot of times I feel my approach is the psychological patterns of disease. So I feel that there's psychological patterns that lead up to the onset of the health problem. And when I see planets going through either cardinal, fixed, or mutable, I'll know that may be the root cause of what the issues are. So I look at the transits and progressions at the time of an onset, and that will indicate what quadruplicity is being activated. And that is also how you need to address it. And I always feel that all major health problems, the major ones, are rooted in an unexpressed childhood trauma. I'll give you an example. This is an example of Patrick. He gave me his chart to use. I remember looking at his chart and I said, something happened to you around the age of 7 and 8 where you felt powerless. I said, and during this time, you couldn't express it. It's something that you were never able to talk about, and it got kind of buried inside so that 30 years later, when your wife left you, she took your money and you lost your job, once again you felt powerless. It would trigger a health problem. And that's usually prostate cancer in a man. They're feeling powerless. They retire and they don't have anything to do. They've lost their power, so to speak. And he says, when I was that age, my little baby brother had leukemia. And this was a long time ago. And he says, he just laid in bed until he died. There was absolutely nothing I could do about it. He says, and then they removed his body and all information, pictures, everything were taken out of the house. And no one ever mentioned him again. So it was a trigger from that childhood trauma. Some things aren't childhood traumas. I mentioned skin cancer. Charlie was my father. As he got older, and when you get older, sometimes your skin gets thinner. He was more inclined to get little skin cancers, but he got that because he was a farmer. He was always working in the yard, so he always had to wear long sleeve shirts and a big straw hat to keep the sun off of his body, and that helped. So some things aren't really connected to a childhood trauma. Now, there are certain houses that are connected with medical astrology, and medical astrology either healing or aptitudes. The prominent ones are houses 2, 6, and 8. House number 2, I really learned this more from doing esoteric astrology and Alice Bailey and Madame Blavatsky back in the 1980s. And I saw a lot of people who had their what we call the soul's purpose triangle connected to the second house, did things like yoga, tai chi, bioenergetics, aerobics. It was body movements that stimulated chi in the body. And so the second house, you might gravitate towards doing those things because it makes you feel better, or you may teach those things. The sixth house is basically someone who would regulate health systems, like vitamins, nutrition, so forth. Pluto is probably the most powerful. Um, I mean, Pluto, the eighth house is probably the most powerful. It's the most obsessive house in the chart. Planets there tend to obsess, but they're great when they obsess on things outside themselves. And the eighth house is healing physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, economic, and technological. There was, well, one of my old clients had a stellium in the eighth house, and he was a financial advisor. He was kind of a controlling personality, and he would take control of your finances, and you would make a lot of money. So he was very good at it. It was very good aptitude for him. And there was a man who started, this was back in the early 80s, the computerizing of the US Post Office service. And he says, I don't fix computers, I heal computers. So obsessiveness can be part of a healing process because eighth house people like to come in, whether it's a business or a person who's sick, come in, take total control, tell them what to do, fix them up, and then let them go. They don't like anybody who's, well, I don't know if I want to do this. You have to let them take control in order to have a healing. Now, the fourth house rules the root chakra and our immune system. So sometimes the fourth house is connected with fields of psychology, where it's connections to the past. And planets who are in the fourth, eighth, and 12th houses, the study of the personality. Oh, I forgot the fifth house. The study of the personality and addictions, obsessive addictions. The fifth house is a healing house because the fifth house rules the system of chakras. That can be Carolyn May's book on chakras, psychology, and body parts. I love that book. I usually make a handout of what she said and give it out to people who are taking my course number 1 because it's really very helpful. But the fifth house is also rules as it rules chakras. People who do really well with healing with crystals and using the chakras, certain types of chakra healing. But the fifth house is also associated with the psychology of the personality and, being in touch with your inner child, the more spontaneous, kind of creative. It can be like art therapy, things like that go under the fifth house. And planets in the fourth, eighth, and 12th house tend to be more traumatic because they tend to be more emotional because they're water houses. And I know somebody asked me well, if you have good planets in the fourth house, wouldn't that be a good thing? All planets in the fourth house some have some type of early trauma associated with them. I'll give a couple of examples. There was a girl in one of my classes a long time ago had Jupiter in Taurus in the fourth house. And when she was 12 years old, she was daddy's girl. And when she was 12 years old, her father died. And she says, after that, I started to look for a substitute for my father. And all I attracted was abusive men. Um, she was in Brazil, and Brazilian men tend not to be the most best husbands. So she moved to America and found a nice American husband. And one person an old friend of mine had Venus in Sagittarius in the fourth house. And she just ran off when she was 16 years old and got married to it was a very bad relationship. So it was very traumatic because, and one of the things is she told me, she says, when I was growing up, I was called trailer trash. She says, we lived in a trailer, we were dirt poor, and I swore I was going to go get an education and I was going to pull myself out of that situation. And she absolutely did. She got a PhD in psychology, and she really pulled herself out of that. So there's always some trauma, even with the good planets, associated with planets, especially in the fourth house. Now, just throw this in here. People who are empaths, this is kind of important in terms of health suggestions. And that is people who are empaths, like strong Neptune water signs. These people are more prone to losing their water soluble vitamins, and that is vitamins B and C. So it's always better to, have either time release vitamins or taking them several times a day, or it's easier to get vitamin C through your foods, like, maybe having an orange, but you really need to, these type of people really need to watch their water soluble vitamins and have them spread out during the course of the day. And there's some things that are signatures here: Neptune, Moon, Neptune, water signs. And there's one that I learned from esoteric astrology. And also, I will say something right now. If you have a question, ask me as right when you think of that question. Just unmute yourself and ask the question. I do better if you interrupt me. There's something I
Lynn, I'm
saw.
going to interrupt you for a second.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
How are you anyway?
Great.
That's good. Cheryl Ann sort of put a little message in here before saying, can you zoom in on your text, as in make them a bit bigger? I'm trying to remember where. That's it. Beautiful.
Okay, is that good enough? It
Is
doesn't.
that good enough, Cheryl Ann? Is that better?
It it is better, yeah. I guess
Well,
the
try to
larger
make
the
it.
better, but it also makes sense that you may want to have like more text. So yeah, that's really great. That's easier for me to read. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And great
But
stuff, Lynn. All right, I'm gonna shut
I
up
know
for a
I
bit.
added more things to it because I thought 90 minutes, I'll never be able to stretch out 90 minutes just doing a profile. So I thought I'd do the introduction stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, this is great. All right.
Ask and so just always interrupt. And I'll be glad to answer your questions as you go along. There's one other thing I've noticed when I was doing esoteric astrology is people who had the strong Taurus Scorpio axis in their charts. They often came up in an environment where there was a great deal of tension, um, like a rubber band that's pulled as far as you can pull it. That type of tension makes them very sensitive to subtle vibrations, and that is picking up when mom is in a bad mood, just picking up the energies, especially if they're going to be negative. As a result, these people make wonderful artists, musicians, and healers. And the type of healing they do is they can pick up the negative energy around the person. So it's a very powerful combination. Sometimes when they don't go into those creative areas, they have a lot of anger. And anger, if it's internalized, becomes depression. So it's best to kind of gear these types of people more towards anything that would be a creative outlet. In esoteric psychology, it's called Ray 4, art and harmony through conflict. It's taking conflict in one's life and then doing something, creatively with that. But it's also a powerful healing combination in a chart. Now, I'm just going to go through some little things about signs. Boy, I wish I could make that smaller. Okay, here we go. I will go through just some general things about the signs, and then I'm going to do a profile. And this is what I do in all of my medical courses. And eventually, if you get to stay with the courses long enough, then you have to start doing those yourself. Um, and I'll just talk about Aries. Now, uh, I also have an article somewhere. It's about you've got to be true to your sun sign. If you're not really manifesting the qualities of your sun sign, you can get sick. And that would be Aries wanting to take charge leadership, do things that are new, doing things their own way. If you're fearful and kind of hold back and become indecisive, that can make an Aries physically sick in the long run. And this is going to be important with Saturn and Neptune in Aries. In classical astrology, is associated with the head, even though I have many rulerships for this area. I mean, the four lobes of the brain are associated with the four elements. And I use a book in my classes. It's not astrological. Eric Braverman, The Edge Effect. And I've had people who that was their doctor was Eric Braverman. And I tell you, when you read what he says about those lobes, you could easily see the four elements. And so I found people who have tumors or head injuries, they can have Mars in the first house, but Aries is often prominent. Um, I don't have an Aries prominent, but I have banged my head 3 times since these planets have gone into Aries. I mean, serious head injuries. So I can't wait till it leaves. Taurus in a chart, and this is not the sun sign, it's just energies in your chart. Taurus is inclined to for diabetes and thyroid issues. The thyroid is also represented by a suppressed Mars, like if it's afflicted or it's not strong or it's intercepted. It's what you call dysfunctional in some way. And Saturn. Saturn rules the throat chakra. I'm really big into the chakras and their rulerships, but Saturn rules the throat chakra. And so when I see issues, say with especially with Taurus, I ask them, what is your body temperature like? If you have body temperature in, say, 97 or even lower, you have a dysfunctional thyroid. Not all doctors will treat that. That's called Wilson syndrome. It's a low body temperature is being symptomatic of an underactive thyroid. Okay. And diabetes, uh, you know, this Dr. Boda Barnes associated underactive thyroids with people who develop diabetes. But diabetes, there's a strong profile for this. I have on my website a chapter that I wrote with Noel Till on diabetes. That there are two types, one ruled by Jupiter and one ruled by Saturn. The one ruled by Jupiter is the people pleaser, who always tries to live up to the expectations of other people, who kind of plays a role, but accepts, say, food as a substitute. And Saturn is someone who is afraid of intimacy. And they often go into creative areas, like could be a carpenter or something like that. Gemini, I've got a lot of Gemini. That's allergies and respiratory ailments. When they feel trapped, they feel they can't breathe. And in my case, my Gemini is intercepted, and I've got my chart way down at the bottom. My Gemini is intercepted, and my mother, she was unhappy. And she did not want me to cry because she couldn't cry. She was unhappy and she didn't cry. So she didn't want me to cry. So later on, I just developed allergies where my nose runs, my eyes water, and it's like all the symptoms of crying. And I also like to watch movies that make me cry. One of the ones that does is my favorite Christmas movie is The Muppets Christmas Carol. The music by Paul Williams, I just sobbed through that. And it's good for me to do this. I even have a Jewish friend who was not allowed to cry. And so he watches these soap opera Christmas movies, and he just sits there and cries the whole time. And his wife says, well, he just needs to cry. And so he watches those films. So watching emotional films can be very helpful. Cancer the health problems are strongly connected with their emotions, especially fears. Fears of the unknown can lead to digestive and what I call solar plexus disorders. Cancer, well, I've got this. Cancer and Virgo are the food addiction signs, have issues with food. And I'll also throw in the asteroid Ceres, that's Ceres. That has to do with the type of nurturing we did or did not receive, and it may connect with food, specifically dairy and gluten. And those people with those elements in their chart need to have a food intolerance test. And I don't have it here, but the best one in this country right now you can order on your own It's by Everlywell, Everlywell, because it will rate the foods from 0 to 4, 4 meaning you have a strong inflammatory reaction to it. If you're in Europe, then it's ImmuPro 300. It's a wonderful test, and it tells you
Then what do they use as the testing? Is it done with hair follicles? Is it done with blood? What's it done with?
I guess it's saliva. I've got the Everlywell
Okay.
here. I'm not sure. In Australia, you have ImmuPro 300. I think it was started there, and it's only used in Europe and in Australia.
Okay.
So having food, as we get older, there's certain foods that can cause inflammations, and I'm not going to go into those right now because I, I'm going to get through this. Leo is back pain, especially lower back, when they shoulder responsibilities they feel they're heavy responsibilities and they don't feel supported. This can also be due to adrenal stress. And I know if you take a raw adrenal extract, like pop two of those things. And if it's the adrenals causing the lower back pain, in 30 minutes, that pain will be gone. Otherwise, if you still have it, it means that you're having problems with the vertebrae kind of pushing in because you're shouldering heavy responsibilities and you don't feel supported. Or sometimes with some Leos, you don't let people support you. You don't learn to delegate. Okay. Now, almost everything is ruled by Virgo. Autoimmune diseases, liver problems, leaky gut syndrome, blood acidity, which can cause osteoporosis because when the blood can't be acid, it always has to be alkaline. And then if it gets acidic, it's going to draw from the bones in order to alkalize itself. And a lot of the problems come through perfectionism, a fear of failure, internalized criticism, whereby the body attacks itself. So an alkaline diet is always more important with Virgo planets. If you can't do alkaline, I get alkaline water, and even in my Brita, I take a little tiny pinch of baking soda and kind of dump it in there. You don't taste it, it doesn't give any, you don't have any salty effects, but it does alkalize the water, and it's very helpful to
Lynn,
drink.
what are your thoughts on things like, for example, um, just to share a little bit, I have the moon in the sixth house opposite Neptune. And it's yeah, and it cops a bit. But I've also got a Mercury T square in the first, and my Uranus and Pluto are in Virgo, and they hit it all the time. So I find that, I've always been allergic to everything ever since I was born. Bit of a story. And when I say that, there's a bit more to it. But every morning I get up and I take, first thing before anything, I have warm water with lemon juice and some apple cider vinegar. So from an alkaline point of view, what are your thoughts on that type of stuff?
Anything that alkalizes, lemons would are considered acidic, but when they get into the body, it makes for alkalinity. It takes an
That's right.
alkaline
Yeah.
to do it. I have a problem with apple cider vinegar because it's a diuretic, and I tend to be low
Yes.
potassium, and so it causes all the problems of low potassium, heart flutters, weak muscles. So I'm a little more, for me personally, I'm more fearful of apple cider vinegar.
Okay.
But it doesn't matter. I just, take a little pinch of baking soda and put in my Brita water, or I buy alkaline water from Costco and drink that to add a little more alkalinity to my diet because I'm not always that good about an alkaline diet.
Neither am I.
One of the things I'm going to inject now, I'm going to be talking about this while I'm doing autism at UAC. I'm going to talk about something I have learned about cures for certain autoimmune diseases, specifically multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, and some other ones that are always accompanied by very high inflammation levels. And I have a neighbor who's had multiple sclerosis for years. And she's walking around with the dog, no symptoms, not using a cane. And I just recently asked her, "What in the world are you doing? You have no symptoms whatsoever." I have friends who, are on canes, they're in wheelchairs. And she says, "Oh, I follow the diet by a doctor. Worrell, Wahl. She developed rheumatoid arth multiple sclerosis, ended up in a wheelchair, and changed her diet. So many health problems, especially if pain is involved and if inflammation is involved, a massive diet change is the cure. And so my first thing is someone who has any type of pain, I would do a food intolerance test and then rule those foods out. I know some foods that Worrell recommends, like fruits, I know cause low-grade inflammation. Also, almonds and pineapple. So I can't eat certain foods like that because they will cause inflammation. He didn't say, or the test really didn't, the one I took originally, which wasn't the Everlywell test. That was, okay, and that was a blood test. You pricked your finger and set it in. So I'm presuming that this Everlywell is kind of the same thing. And oh God, now I'm losing my train of thought. Um, Now I forgot where I was going with this. Um, Inflammation. Well, I know a lot of health problems, like some of the people who are taking the classes who have polycystic ovarian syndrome, people who have certain types of arthritis, said they changed their diet, got rid of dairy and gluten, felt that they really had a great transformation. And I know what it is. There's certain foods that I would eat that may be okay according to Worrell, that I have a reaction to. So I know not to eat those things. And generally, if you're healthy, you don't really have, you could eat some what we call no-nos in the food category. But it's when you're not feeling well, when you're tired, if you have some type of health problem. I know the doctors at the famous Johns Hopkins University, they if you have like Lyme disease, you have to go on a strict anti-inflammatory diet. Once you have been, cured for a while, then you can slowly incorporate those foods into your diet. Okay, let me go on through some of these. Libra. This can cause relationship problems can affect the kidneys. You would think that's too simplistic. I had a friend, she was the youngest president of an NCGR chapter in the history. She was in her late 20s, and she was in an abusive relationship. And she was a Libra, and she developed, well, she did kidney disease, and she lost the function of her kidneys, and that forced her to get out of that relationship. And she went to medical school, and now she's a regular MD with a kidney specialty, and also went into another like holistic types of health. So she's very well known in the realm of kidney and lectures at conferences and things like that. And so I know people who have relationship problems, it can affect the kidneys. Now, kidneys is not like you're going to have kidney disease, but it manifests like through the skin, like like psoriasis or dry skin. And also people who have boundary issues are more prone. Now, you can have boundary issues and not get skin cancer. But if you have skin cancer, you have boundary issues. And I had a class with this school years ago where everybody in the class had a subject with skin cancer. And they all had boundary issues because the skin is the boundary of the body. And I said, this week I know people who've had melanoma. I'm going to give them a call and ask them, do they have boundary issues? And every one of them said, oh, yes, my mother, I couldn't say no. And I said, developing strong sense of boundaries is it is a healing practice. And this astrologer doctor, when I asked her, I said, about parasites in the body. Someone asked about that. And candida tends to be connected to, rosacea tends to be connected with candida. That's what doctors have said. And I said, what would you tell somebody to do about this? And she said, I will tell you, I went on at the health food store, something called Paraforce. to get rid of internal parasites. And she says, when I started get rid of those internal parasites, all of a sudden the external two-legged parasites started leaving my life. They just started exiting. And I realized it was not having boundaries for those parasites in my life, the two-legged ones, that led to having them on the inside. Okay. Scorpio, toxicity is connected to repressed emotions and bottled resentments. I'm not going to say Scorpio is connected with multiple sclerosis, but I'm going to say it is a conflict between like the energy of Scorpio and Aquarius. And that is these people were often pushed to be in control very early on in life. And they just can't, they just feel that, well, if they don't control things, something terrible is going to happen. But the Iranian or Aquarian part is, I resent it. I'm internally rebelling against it, even though I can't stop that habit. And what happens is the body listens and says, well, you don't want to be in control anymore. We'll help you out. We'll lose control. So we destroy the shaft along the nerves and you lose control of your body. But my friend who went on the world diet, she says, even the lesions on my brain have healed over and there's nothing but scar tissue. Her doctor can't believe that she has totally cured herself of multiple sclerosis. And her husband has rheumatoid arthritis or had it, and he's on that diet too, because both of those diseases have very high inflammation levels. And so often, one of the things they do for you is give you the MTHFR test. Because at some point in your life, something switches off, and these people don't have the ability to absorb like folates and certain B vitamins that are the homocysteine blockers. So they have to take these folates and Bs. Either there's something called Serafolin, which I believe you can just buy online now. It used to be a prescription. And I don't have this, but I'm a Virgo. I take everything. Neurobiologics has this methylation pro, which has, you rub it on your skin, B12, B6, folates, all kinds of stuff in it. But I'm a Virgo. I take everything. If I find it doesn't work, then I don't take it anymore. Okay, let me go through Sagittarius. The fear of moving forward for Sagittarius can lead to sciatica. Um, and illness can take place for Sagittarius and Aquarius if they no longer have a vision in their life for a long time. It can make them sick. They have to see a light at the end of the tunnel. They don't have to get to that light, but they have to be looking forward to it and moving in that direction. It doesn't matter that the vision is achieved or not, but they always have to have that light at the end of the tunnel. If it's not, they get depressed. Um, Capricorn is when you're not supported in responsibilities. Leo, Virgo, and Capricorn, they have problems with the spine and bone degeneration. And with Capricorn, there was an expectation that they be a certain way for the entire family. For Aquarius energy, women are susceptible to anemia. So, if you're a vegetarian, you may not want red meats, but dried fruit and eggs can help with iron. Circulation problems when trapped in life and no vision of the future. B12 can cause ringing in the ears. And when you have a lot of Aquarius or strong Uranus, you have a highly charged electromagnetic field. And what happens when you're around other people's bodies for a long period of time? You get really drained. So they need a lot of space to kind of recharge their energies. And sometimes it's like I had a cousin who was very Iranian, and she says, I couldn't sleep with my husband. He was always hot and I was always cold. We just agreed to sleep in separate bedrooms. Didn't we love each other? Didn't get together periodically, but we just did better sleeping apart. And then sometimes they find a partner that helps calm and soothe that electromagnetic field. Because I know if I'm giving a lecture or when I was giving a reading, if people like move their chair too close to me, I couldn't think. I said, you've got to move back a little bit, or, my electromagnetic field is going to be blocked. And you have to see this is really an important part of your body and your healing is to have a respect for that highly charged electromagnetic field. Because I know people who have Mars and Aquarius in the fourth house. I always tell them, don't be out in an electrical storm when there's a thunderstorm, because your body energies are, it's like, going with a kite with a piece of metal attached to it. And I've had a number of people say, I was standing out on the balcony and this lightning shot by me and I ran inside. They're highly charged, so you have to be really careful being out in some type of electrical storm. With Pisces energy in the chart, that's the nice person. And all that nice people have is being nice only clogs the arteries, causing hardening of the arteries. And seeing yourself as a victim leads to depression. Pisces must always play as hard as it works. They must always have creative activities in order to escape. And I've seen a lot of my old dance teacher was a Pisces, and a sports coach, the basketball coach in the college nearby, he was a Pisces. So, even doing sports or recreative types of things, they need escape and they need to play as hard as they work. There are just some things I'll just touch on before I go into how I profile. The liver is ruled by Jupiter, and the lobes of the liver are Cancer and Virgo. The fifth house, and I have some of the houses rule the function of some part of the body. Like the second house rules the function of the lymphatic system. It doesn't rule it, it has to do with the function of the lymphatic system. So people who have planets in their second house need to have some type of body movements. They can't have a kind of a sedentary type of job. Even I have one of these machines, you stand on it, it vibrates, and I kind of enjoy working with that. And also trans Pluto, if anybody needs this, I wrote an article for the NCGR on trans Pluto, and it really summarized everything about trans Pluto, but it has to do with criticism and absorb criticism. So it's connected with autoimmune diseases. And food allergies, there's so many of those things. On my website, there's weight loss in the transformational process that I wrote for NCGR, I think in 2004. And so the moon and its aspects and series are associated with food intolerances. And sometimes it's connected with the nurturing we did or did not receive. And sometimes it can be a reaction to the mother. There was a woman from Berlin who came here and she had these food allergies. And she says, I can eat cooked carrots, but I can't eat raw carrots because my mother never cooked carrots. She only served raw carrots. And she was the type of person, she says, if I came out and I didn't have a happy face on, my mother would make me go back to my bedroom and not come back until I could come back with a happy face. She says, meals were so stressful that you had to pretend you were happy the entire time. And she developed an intolerance to those kind of foods that were associated with her mother. Now, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to put this chart up. Now, I've got all this stuff written here, which I can send you. But I'm going to leave this up so you can see the chart. I don't have to really remember it. And with everybody who takes my classes, now, does anybody have any questions? I talk nonstop. I could talk till midnight. Um, but you have to interrupt me and say, what about this or what about that or ask something, and I'm glad to answer it. And I enjoy interruptions. Anybody have any questions or any?
Yes.
Okay, good, good.
So you mentioned that you wrote an article on trans Pluto, and I just went to Google to try to search for it, but I wonder if you could
It's
just,
not online. All you have to do is write to me and I'll send it to you. And
okay, great.
it's lynn.koiner@gmail.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, because it's associated with wholeness and integration, putting yourself back together the way that you want to be. Um, so any of these articles, I'll be happy. That would be Trans Pluto, and there was another one I could send you, but I forgot what it was. Okay. When I profile it, it just helps me with my research. And what it is I'll just go down here. I list the astrological patterns. These patterns may not have anything to do with the health problems. And why I'm using this chart, it is just incredible. I have had severe head injuries since Saturn and Neptune have gone into the sign of Aries. The first one I was out, I said, "Oh, I don't need to put my grippers on," and it was a sheet of ice out feeding the birds. I slipped on the ice, and there's an iron pole. My head banged up against it, and I could hear the pole vibrating. My head was bleeding, but there was no internal bleeding, so I guess I have a really hard skull. Exactly. That was February 1st. Well, I'm not going to do the dates. And exactly 1 month later, I tripped over the wires trying to go to I heard cats screaming outside. I didn't want it to be mine. And I tripped on all the wires that go from my modems and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't want to knock the TV off. So I kind of turned and I fell and banged my head on it's a bar stool, but I put my desktop on top of it. I hit the back of my head just above the earlier injury. And then when I was in uh, Salzburg, Austria, I was walking to the train station. I had this wonderful suitcases on 6 rollers, and it rolls so fast, and it rolled right in front of me. And over what I went, and I slammed the left side of my face onto the blacktop road. People were really good, lifted me up and tried to help me. I was fine in all of those situations, but I've never had injuries to my head. And all of a sudden, with Neptune and Saturn, so, I'm kind of warning people, kind of really be careful, of falls and accidents, because these planets really are taking aim on the head and head injury. Also, um, I used to get health information from the Edgar Casey readings. I started that back in January of 1969 when you could borrow the circulating files. Now I can just do Edgar Casey and leukemia, and I'll come up with kind of a profile on what Edgar Casey said about that. And uh, and so I would often find what the root problems were. Now, what am I see, I start rambling and I forget what I was going to talk about. Let me just continue on with this. Um, okay. Oh, what we're really aiming at is what's going on in terms of the head and head injuries with this Saturn. And now I got it. Now I know. I have so many thoughts rolling in my head that it gets kind of scrambled. I remember, the stimulating the lymph. I have a lymphatic physiology. And this woman has a lymphatic and fixed physiology, but it's strongest with the lymph. And when you have a lymphatic physiology, a lot of health problems are going to be connected or find their root in the lymph. I've had Epstein-Barr, had tonsillitis, swollen glands in my neck. I hit my side of my leg on the sharp end of a table 60 years ago, and I've got a big knot there. So a lot of my health problems find their root in the lymphatic system. And I was wondering, well, uh, how can I know how to stimulate the lymph just in my body, but what do you do about the head? And so I was Googling this and I learned that the brain does have its own lymphatic system. It was the glial cells, and the doctors will call it glymph. It is the lymph in the glial cells that it kind of runs in the middle of your head. It's in between the two hemispheres. And one of the things that really helps with that is the Edgar Casey head neck exercises, because that helps stimulate the lymphatic system and the lymph kind of detoxes the brain. So we got to protect yourself from tumors and things. Do the Edgar Casey, and I always forget it. When I talk about it, I remember to do it, and that's bending your head forward 3 times, backward 3 times, to each side 3 times, and then rolling your head around to the right 3 times, rolling it to the left 3 times. You can always do Edgar Casey head neck exercises, and Google it, and you'll get that information. That would stimulate, and I think it's important now that Saturn and Neptune are in the sign of Aries to kind of to support anything that has to go with the head. I haven't noticed it with the outer planets going through other signs, but I sure have noticed it with Neptune and Saturn in Aries. Okay. Now, one of the things I notice in this chart, and I can do this if somebody has no health problems at all. I never tell somebody something that's going to frighten them. If this person came to me and had no health problems at all, there's certain things I would tell her. And what I usually, and I retired from giving readings. Um, I would always say, I'm really interested in medical astrology. Would you mind if I gave you some little tidbits that would kind of perk up the body while you're going through this Uranus transit? And they always say, oh, yes, I'd really like to hear this. And I will tell you, most of the time with my clients, they would say, I've just started to do those things. And so they really related to what I had to say. But just looking at this chart, because I can't say what her health problems are. I can't diagnose. I usually ask people, have you had a diagnosis? Sometimes I can get certain symptoms and kind of know what they are, or I can Google what they are. And one of the things, this person has a lot of fire signs. There's a grand fire trine here. This is trans Pluto, and this is Ceres, and this is Chiron. She has a grand fire trine. And also, while Mars isn't in Mars in Capricorn rules the gallbladder. And if you've got Mars in Capricorn, stay away from cheese and chocolate. And when you eat those things or fatty things, you take a pill of ox bile. Ox bile will dissolve or digest all fats in the stomach so they don't have to go through the liver and the gallbladder. And somebody at the Edgar Cayce Clinic told me that a long time ago. Okay. Two things, Mars in Capricorn, Mars intercepted. I always use Placidus because whole signs, you're not going to get certain things. And you're not going
Lynn,
to,
you
yes,
you were talking about Mars in Capricorn, but Mars is in
yes, I know.
Sagittarius.
I've skipped over that. Mars in Capricorn rules the gallbladder. She doesn't have Mars in Capricorn, but she has Mars intercepted. And interceptions are blocked energy. So that can contribute because I'm rambling. I apologize. When you have a dominance of fire signs, this often affects the gallbladder. And people who have had their gallbladder removed have often talked about or have gallstones says it's crystallized anger. So if you have a strong propensity to gallbladder issues, that would be a dominance of fire signs. Now, people with a lot of fire signs don't have to have their gallbladder removed or don't even develop gallstones, especially if they're active and doing things. But if there's a lot of frustration in life and anger becomes crystallized, it can contribute. And I've just noticed over the years, people who have gallstone or gallbladder issues either have a preponderance of fire signs or Capricorn, especially Mars in Capricorn, or Mars. I'll call it a dysfunctional Mars. I have a dysfunctional Mars in Cancer, I mean, in Gemini. She has it in Sagittarius. And so when Mars is blocked in some way, now I will say she uses her Mars in her work. She is an entertainment media organizer. She organizes all of the entertainment in the DC area. Not for Donald Trump, for local situations. Okay. So she's able to really use that Mars. But when I see the fire signs, I would say, you have the fire signs have a strong connection with gallbladder issues. And that a lot of times has to do with anger. And so I would tell the person just to be on the safe side when you're eating fats, especially cheese and chocolate that cannot be, the gallbladder can't handle those two. Why don't you take ox bile? It's good for you anyway. I also take hydrochloric acid. As we get older, we lose that acidity in our stomach. And so sometimes you're not able to digest things or get the nutrition from your food. And some people, when they're kind of devoid of that stomach acid, like H. pylori can grow and they develop an H. pylori ulcer. So, I take, it's what is it? Solar Ray has hydrochloric acid with pepsin. And when I have like a big meal, I take that. And if there's fat in it, I take ox bile. So I would advise this person to maybe watch fats and also, if she's eating fatty foods, to take ox bile. Now, there's only one air sign in her chart, that's Mercury. So she has a weak air. The element of air rules the parietal lobe of the brain, and that is associated with phosphatidylcholine and HMB. I take this every day, and it keeps me remembering where I put my keys, where I left something, that I have something on the stove. And if I don't take it within 2 days, it's like, where are my keys? Where did I put this? I can't find that. Where am I going? I start to kind of have these little lapses. And I remember, and also something else that helps the brain is um, vinpocetine. I've got it written down here because after I had the third accident to my head, um, there were periods when all of a sudden everything would go blank. Like it's a very strange feeling. It's not like being just not thinking. It was like all of a sudden everything would go blank. And that really frightened me. I said, there are gaps in my memory. And so I recognized I hadn't taken my phosphatidylcholine in a couple of days, and I take two capsules of those and two capsules of HMB, and then I added vinpocetine, which stimulates circulation in the brain. There was an astrologer whose father had a stroke, and he fed him vinpocetine, and she said, really helped him get his memory back. That's the only reason I started taking vinpocetine because it scared me having those three head injuries. Okay. And so without that, that would be, and
How do
it, but
you spell that? Vinpocetine? Is it a V or a B?
it's a V. Let me see where. Oh, here it is. Here it is, right here. You'll have it when you get this handout. Um, you'll get this. This phosphatidylcholine. They has phosphatidylserine, and sometimes I take that, but I tend to like the choline because it tends to work directly with the brain, and it is oh, the substance associated by Dr. Braverman with the parietal lobe of the brain. I have a lot of air, so the parietal is very strong with me for me, but she only has one. But anybody can take this stuff. We all have a parietal lobe of the brain. We all don't want to lose our memory as we get older. And I will tell you, phosphatidylcholine, it's just, I remember certain things. I always amaze myself. God, I remembered where I put my keys. And I remember where I put, some item, and I remember where I left something. I don't have to walk into the other room and then go back to figure out what I went
Lynn,
for. Yes,
sorry to jump in. That document you sent me
it's not enough. It's not the whole thing because I
okay.
added this other stuff.
All right.
I'll
So I was
send
gonna.
you this, and then you can send it to everybody.
All right. No worries. Look. Okay.
Okay, okay.
What I'll probably do is, uh, yeah, just email me anybody who wants a copy. Probably the best way.
Okay.
Just Luke at astrocollege.com. The reason I say that is normally I put these recordings up on YouTube. I can't really post a document up there, but just because I might not have everyone's email address.
Okay. Okay.
All right. I'll put my email address in the chat session. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you interrupt. It's always helpful. Okay.
Lynn, I've
Yeah.
got a question going back
Yes,
to what you're saying about
Cheryl, go
fire
ahead.
signs and fatty foods. Um, I'm not sure if liver is considered fatty, but just intuitively, I'm wondering what you have to say on liver as a food.
Um, well, I've got this here. You'll have it written up when you get the file.
Okay.
Um, Let me go down some of these things till I get to it, but I will discuss that. Well, I'll tell you right now, and I've got it written up. Let's see, what page is it on? Uh, I know it's in bold print someplace. Um, well, I can't see it. When it comes to, I wrote this down. When it comes to the liver, um, if you really want to do something that's more dramatic and have a true liver gallbladder cleanse, I have one from Hulda Clark. I made some adjustments on it that you can clean that liver and gallbladder in about 18 hours. I'm not big on these detox diets that last a month or even 2 weeks. I'm not going to stay on those things, but 18 hours, I can do that one. And I remember the first time I took that, there were chunks of cholesterol, which are like tan squidgy things, and chunks of galls. They weren't still like gall things. They were the squidgy cholesterol that were green because they were been in the gallbladder. And then there was this stuff like black rice. I have no idea what that was. The toilet was filled with that stuff. And afterwards, when I did the liver detox, uh, I didn't have anything like that. That's the big one. But there's something else that is very good and very helpful. And I think everybody should at least take it maybe four days in a row every month. I think it's good for everybody because we have a lot of issues around the liver. Liver can cause allergy problems because it becomes overloaded with toxins, whatever, overworked. And that is Planetary Herbals has a supplement, Bluepurum liver cleanse. It's if you just think of Planetary Herbals liver cleanse, and a nutritionist told me to take four of those at night on an empty stomach. And I remember I gave a lecture in Ohio, and this woman had just had her gallbladder removed, and the doctor bumped into her liver, and she was having a lot of pain in that liver, in the area of her liver. And she says, it's bruised and it really hurts. And I said, well, I brought my Planetary Herbals liver cleanse with me. Pop four of these things and see if it will help you because it really is very powerful. And she also took it with a glass of wine. Not exactly the best thing, but when she got up the next morning, she says, I don't believe it. All the pain in my liver is gone. So it's very powerful. You can get it at any health food store, order it from Amazon. It tells you two ways to take it low, like take two capsules a couple times a day. You need to take it on an empty stomach. But the nutritionist told me, Lynn, just take four of them at night on an empty stomach because at night I won't have eaten for quite a while. And so that is wonderful for a liver detox. That's the easiest. And I think it's something everybody should take. The liver is ruled by Virgo, Cancer, um, and the fifth house rules the function of the liver. I know I used to see, oh, what is it? When I was doing like hepatitis, and I just had charts of famous people, and I thought, oh, they've all got planets in the fifth house. Well, they're entertainers, so it must be associated with their careers. But then I started looking at people who had liver problems that weren't in entertainment, and they had planets in the fifth house. Some of these combinations would come up. So the key is when I would see this Virgo and Cancer and a planet in the fifth house, I would say, listen, if you want to perk your body up and keep your liver functioning because that's going to give you energy, then you take this Planetary Herbals liver cleanse. Just take four of them at night, say 4 days a month. Say the first 4 days of the month you're going to take the liver cleanse. Just take that, go to bed, and you're going to find it really, because it has all those herbs like that dandelion and all kinds of things that are supposed to be good for your liver. It has all of them, not just taking one. So that's what I would really recommend. If you really wanted to do serious detox, it would be you can write to me about for the Hilda Clark liver cleanse. It takes about 18 hours. It doesn't always taste that good. But I tell you, I just did it once. The first time, it just got all rid of all kinds of stuff. Then after a while, maybe once a year I would do it. Now I haven't done it in quite a while. So just doing the Planetary Herbals liver cleanse. This is a really good support for your body. So this is what I would tell her because I'm going to give her this. She's just a friend. I was going to give her this profile for her. The other thing, okay, she's got planets in the fourth house. And it is a stellium in Virgo. So we're going to see Virgo. There can be a problem with foods. Virgo and Cancer are going to have problems with foods, problems with overeating, and she is obese. She had, what is that, bypass or bariatric surgery, which I don't think has helped that much. She doesn't eat that much. She drinks a lot. Um, but she's a good friend, and so. Um, but planets in the fourth house always have traumas from the childhood. Got a lot of planets here. And usually when you have a lot of planets, you seem to be stuck on things with your childhood. Now, what about her childhood was that Her mother married a man that she just loved, but he was an abusive man. He used to hit her mother, and it was a very abusive situation. And so there's a lot of traumas associated with that. And then when she did a DNA test, she discovered that man wasn't even her father. She discovered it was an animal trainer for San Diego Zoo, and he used to work with the bear on Gentle Ben, and he was a really nice guy. Unfortunately, by the time she found out who he was, he had passed away, but she did make a connection. And she's really just still very angry with her mother for marrying this man, the one man who wasn't her husband, who raised her, she called him dad, for marrying this man and putting up with all the abuse. She still carries a lot of that anger and resentment. And one of the things, anger and resentment can build up with people who are lymphatic physiologies. The lymph is ruled by planets in mutable signs, water signs, the moon, Neptune, and the second house. I've got this written down here someplace. And she developed breast cancer. It wasn't anything big, but she had that, and I feel it was a lot of resentment, as it came at the time when she discovered that her father wasn't her real father, and her mother, who had a fling in between when they were separated and got pregnant, but went back with her husband and just didn't know. And that she could have had a wonderful father. Instead, she got this abusive one, and she just has carried a lot of resentments. And I do have an article on breast cancer on my website. I haven't kept my website up because it's blocked me for some reason. I can't get in, and I don't know how to get in. So that's it. Okay. And I have down here about Virgo, it's autoimmune diseases, liver problems, leaky gut intestine, blood acidity due to perfection, internal criticism, and what I just said before, having the alkalize the system. Cancer and Virgo rule the lobes of the liver, and they are the food addiction signs. And she's had weight issues her entire life. And Ceres, connected with this stellium, is connected with the relationship with the mother. And so there's an intolerance with regard to gluten and dairy. Now, I have stuff here. I'm not going to go into everything. When you get this filed, you'll have it. And Mars is intercepted. And when a planet is intercepted, it's kind of blocked. But it's like having a planet in the 12th house, but not really, because the planet can only express itself in the house that it's in. And so that Mars in Sagittarius, that's much more a visionary, um, somebody who is a promoter, someone who inspires other people. And that's really what she does in her work. But when Mars is blocked, then you can have problems with anger being blocked. Or frustrated in some way. And I feel that it's blocked by the parents or early environmental factors. Um, and sometimes, I've got this written down, so I'm not going to go into all of it. But that also, with a dysfunctional Mars, could contribute to gallbladder issues. I don't think she said anything about gallbladder, but the liver gallbladder, they kind of work together. And it would be something I would kind of tell her. But her job now is activating that Mars in Sagittarius. Um, Medically, when Mars is intercepted, you're either accident prone, it can affect the adrenal thyroids, or it can cause high inflammation levels that are connected with certain autoimmune diseases. She does have autoimmune. Um, and then I've got the rulerships of the lymphatic system. I'm not going to go into that. I'll just show you. See, I've got all of this stuff here. Um, the reason I picked this chart um, with the Aries is that she discovered, well, she had breast cancer a couple of years ago and reconstruction surgery because she has lymph issues. Um, Currently, she has autoimmune high blood pressure, and that has caused leaking of fluids in her brain. And I believe where she pointed, it's in the temporal lobe. And the temporal lobe is ruled by earth signs. And you've got that stellium in Virgo, which is the earth sign. The frontal lobe is by fire, parietal is air, occipital is water, but we're just dealing with the temporal. And that's temporal is associated with GABA. GABA is the calming, or the temporal lobe is supposed to be very calming. The it's what it is connected with in terms of GABA is supposed to keep you calm in stressful situations and help you stay organized, kind of develop a system. Um, Okay, I'll just go into that. And what else do I? Okay, autoimmune disorders are ruled by trans-Pluto, which is perfectionism, which is absorbed by the liver and turned in on itself. And that's I'll send this article, maybe not tonight, first thing in the morning to Luke, and then he can pass it on to you. So autoimmune diseases are associated with trans-Pluto, whereby the body attacks itself. Saturn, Neptune, lack of boundaries, so criticism becomes absorbed. And Mars, which is anger internalized. I always associate it with trans Pluto. And there was an astrologer on, it used to be the Conjunction Yahoo group. She was always attacking everybody, even me. But she was so bright. And then years later, she wrote to me, she says, Lynn, I really loved all the stuff you published on the Yahoo group and about autoimmune. And let me tell you what I found. And so I've added the Saturn, Neptune, and Mars to it. She says people with autoimmune diseases need to really deal with their anger. Now, she has high blood pressure associated with the autoimmune disorder. And I feel there's a couple of things that may influence the autoimmune. High blood pressure is connected with the pressures of the fixed signs and Leo, as well as congested lymph. I will tell you something about her. I think I've only seen this 3 times. There are people who they're overweight, but their body is very solid. I'm flabby, but they're kind of solid, but they're not, they don't lift weights. They have very firm arms. And what that is, it's called old astrologers back in the 1800s or early 1900s used to call this myxedema, and myxedema was a signature of an underactive thyroid. And high blood pressure and cholesterol is related to an underactive thyroid. So I feel that she does have an underactive thyroid. I don't know how she's treating this, but she does have an underactive thyroid. So okay. And these are just my astrological signatures for high blood pressure. Usually a fixed sign is going to be involved. And I usually find inconjuncts or those minor afflictions like 45, 135, in terms of something going on. Those minor aspects are problems that you can't resolve because they're really maybe connected more with other people. Like a child having a lot of problems or something at work you can't change. And if a fixed sign is involved, it can cause high blood pressure. It can be stress caused by Pluto transits, progress Mercury to Uranus, even the minor afflictions, because the minor afflictions must be taken into account because it has to do with matters outside your control, so stress builds up. Now, what it is, this is where I have all this stuff. There was something else I wanted to talk about, but okay. So I was looking at the chart and I know. I have to, maybe I need to write this down. Trans Pluto and Saturn Neptune article, because I have Saturn Neptune conjunction through the houses. It's just personal, but it has some political things too. Okay. Because what's been going on in her chart. I mean, I have 3 friends who have brain fluid leakage. I have never even heard of this before, but having 3 people in 1 week tell me that they have leaking fluid in their brain. And this particular person, it was because the high blood pressure put pressure on her brain and has caused something like uh, the fluids to kind of leak in her brain. And one individual, it's actually gone down into her stomach and causes terrible stomach cramps. And she has terrible stomach cramps. So I'm wondering if that spinal fluid hasn't really gone down into her stomach, which causing those cramps. But what's going on is Saturn and Neptune is crossing that moon in Aries. That is the big signatures. The progressed sun is crossing her Neptune in the fifth house in Scorpios. And so we find the root having to do with resentments and plural eliminations. You think a lot of this stuff is coming on when because when she loves her mother comes and visits. I love her mother. But you can tell she gets really angry at her mother for you put up with this crazy man who was abusive to all of us and abusive to you. And then you could have married this wonderful man who trained Gentle Ben back in San Diego. Um, and high blood pressure and liver issues because the fifth house rules the function of the liver. Okay, liver conditions and high blood pressure are closely linked because you asked about, Virgo and the liver. And, I always, because I see there's liver problems and high blood pressure. Are they related? And I just go in and I Google that and I find absolutely liver conditions and blood pressures are very closely linked. And often associated with maybe with a fatty liver that is associated with a systemic hypertension. And here I have the easy liver detox is besides the Hulda Clark. If anybody needs that, want to try it, I can send you that cleanse, but not everybody wants to do it. But this one here, Planetary Herbal Buplorum Liver Cleanse, 4 tablets a night. It's a wonderful detox and it's easy. I just say 4 tablets, 4 days, 4 nights in a row, first four parts of the month. Um, that this is a good way to kind of perk up your liver. Also, she's going through a second Saturn return. And I find in Chinese medicine, I have a friend who was studied and taught Chinese medicine in California. And the second Saturn return it's called something else, but it's the second Saturn return, is associated with health issues. And it's often because we're having to readjust our responsibilities to other people. In my case, I was taking on too many things for other people who were in Europe. And as a result, I was run down and I developed Epstein-Barr. With the Epstein-Barr, I developed painful neuralgia. It was like being stabbed with a knife. And while I did take anti-inflammatory supplements, it wasn't until like almost 2 years later I heard Dr. Andrew Weil say, um, uh, you can take anti-inflammatory supplements, but you have to do an anti-inflammatory diet. And so I just ate white meat, chicken, and easy to digest vegetables. That's all I ate. And within 2 weeks, 2 years of pain was gone. Until at Christmas time, I ate some of my really good Lindt chocolate fudge that I make. And boy, the pain came back with the veg, and I had to go back on the diet. After a while, I didn't have to follow that diet. But the second Saturn return is often connected with health issues. And there were other things. There's a progressed full moon with her progressed Neptune, and it's an ending cycle. Progressed full moons are often an ending cycle in your life. So I just felt that she was going to be able to move past this. And there were other aspects here I've listed. Really seems that like the liver seems to be connected with this in some way. But I do see in 27 and 28 that like we're here, the sun is squaring Jupiter in Leo, but after that, in 27 and 28, the sun makes really good aspects, which I feel is going to improve the health. And I will tell you something interesting. Sometimes people have come down with really serious health issues, and I can look and just say, I just don't see anything of major significance that would cause this health problem. And what it is when I don't see anything of significance, there might be something small that's going on, then it usually indicates that they're going to improve and they're going to recover. It's only when they're really bad aspects that maybe they have a hard time recovering. But when it doesn't seem that strong, like it doesn't seem that strong in her chart. It's just that, Saturn and Neptune going over a moon, and in a couple of years, the aspects are going to be great. So I just feel she's going to recover from this, even though she's very worried about having surgery to remove the fluids from her brain. And there's something else. I'm going to give you a little technique. We still have 15 minutes. This is when I used to teach beginning astrology. I used to love that because I would learn so much about myself and my own aspects. And I was back when I was studying in the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s, psychological astrology was very strong. I love Betty Ludsted's book. There was one out of England that was very good at psychological analyzing the aspects. But when you start to study astrology you want to make predictions. I want to make predictions. When am I going to be able to make a prediction? And okay, one of the things I tell people, just pick out something that you want to talk about. I learned this from doing mini readings. I just say, oh, let me talk about your moon in Cancer. And I see some aspects to it. I would kind of, because Virgos are good at that. But one of the things that was really good was now I use wide orbs in medical astrology and psychological astrology for the hard aspects. I can change these orbs with solar fire very easily. And I've got childhood trauma periods from 6.5 to 8 years of age. And you're going to see, like this is, it doesn't matter whether it's applying or separating. This is 7. It's really by soul. This is the degree of separation from exactness, which means in 7 years, that aspect is going to be triggered, which means at 7 years, that moon is going to align with Saturn. And in all 6.5 years, the sun and moon will be in opposition. You can see this. Let me go back up here
So
so you can,
Lynn,
yes.
when you're talking about that it doesn't matter if it's applying or separating, are you saying that converse solar arcs are just as effective for this as regular solar arcs?
Um, I I do something else with Converse. Let's just do solar arcs. It's going to be easier than thinking in terms of because it just has to do with you can see here. This is almost 8 degrees of separation. A little over. It's about 8 degrees of separation by a degree for a year. That moon will sit on Saturn, and this is also by a degree for a year the fourth house cusp will align with Pluto. And I'm going to go back down here. You have to get to the prediction part. The moon Saturn is often the easiest. If you look and you just see, and I would say, look at that moon Saturn. We're using wide orbs. They don't work after, once they get too wide apart, they don't really work. But these do. And so I say, when you see this aspect, how you'll learn how that aspect works. Say, I see something connected with your mother just before you turned 8 years of age. Moon Saturn means that often you were weaned early. You were kind of like mother had another baby. She went to work. She wasn't really there for you because of responsibilities. And so you learn not to trust emotionally. And you learned also, well, if you care about people, you have to be responsible. You have to make them happy. And I said, ask the person what happened just before they were 8 years of age. And you don't have to make a big prediction, but you can talk about what happened with your mother and that you felt separated from her. Maybe she went to work, she had another baby. And here we have separative aspects, moon Uranus, sun moon. This could indicate a divorce on the part of the parents. And so mother had to go back to work. So she couldn't really be there for you, and you had to start shouldering responsibilities. Now, I know a lot about these aspects, but I would tell the person, you see that aspect, say, did something happen with even if it just said, did something happen with your mother that, you had to kind of take care of yourself? She wasn't there for you. You don't have to tell them everything. They'll give you the answers, and you'll learn about that aspect, and they'll think, oh my God, you did a great job talking about my mother. And when I talk about health issues, I look for aspect clusters when there's several aspects occurring around the same time. So there's things connected with her mother, and this may be more connected with breast cancer later on, certain types of resentments. And what it is they're unexpressed traumas. When I was teaching astrology, all of those bad aspects in my chart, we just discussed those things to death. People would talk about their mother. I would talk about my mother. It was just, I divested myself of all of those feelings and realizing that Everybody was kind of the same. We all just had problems with our mothers. And so it was okay. And I kind of divested those things of myself. So I didn't really suffer from the health issues that could have risen for keeping everything inside. But this is was one of the first techniques that I would teach people. You look for a bad aspect and say, what happened at that time? And if you see a cluster, then and when I talked about the man who had prostate cancer, there was a big cluster of aspects like these around 7 and 8 years of age. And so I wanted to know because I knew he had what is it, prostate cancer, and that was powerlessness. So I just asked him what was going on that you felt powerless but couldn't say anything about it and didn't discuss it. And that was when his baby brother died and everything. This was in Switzerland. Back in those days, the Swiss were very Saturnian. Um, Okay. Now, do you have any questions? And so I put the childhood trauma periods here that something was going on. I usually always include those in my classes. And the people who take the classes have to go back and ask the person what happened at this time. I haven't gotten all the information from her at this time. I just know some of the things. You were talking about Converse. Okay, this is it.
Well, the
Because
reason that I asked about that was because you said that it doesn't matter if the aspect is applying or separating. But if it were a separating aspect, then it would have to be a converse solar arc.
no, I'll show you. Let me see. Let me go back. Everything moves a degree for a year. So even let's see, everything moves for a degree for a year. And so Pluto by solar arc at the age of 5 would sit on that sun. That's not really converse. It's just in solar arc, the slow moving planets move at the same rate. This is not separating from Pluto. Do you
Hmm.
kind of understand that?
Yes.
Okay. When you say converse, it's something a little different, but I'll give you another little technique. This you can kind of work on yourself. I need to put this together in a book because I've lectured on this a lot. You can do this this has nothing to do with medical astrology. It's something fun you can do. Um, and that is, my old astrology teacher, Ernie Grant at the AFA, he was coming up with theories. He says, planets in the 12th house often trigger events that occurred before you were born. But then he passed away and never did anything. And of course, when you're first learning astrology, my God, I was obsessed. Back in the 60s and 70s, there used to be something called obscene phone callers because you didn't have caller ID. When I would get those, I'd say, oh my God, an obscene phone caller. Do you know what time you were born? I'm studying astrology. And by God, every time they would give me their birth data. So I got a lot of collection of those things. And what it is, this is converse. If you take the ascendant, this works for all the Caden houses, but we're just going to do with the 12th. If you go back a degree for a year to Mercury, it's going to indicate something that happened. Say this is really like 22 degrees. So it would be something happened 10 years before I was born. Now, when somebody comes, I don't say 10 years before you were born. I subtract it from the year they were born. I said, back in 1935, there's some change around a parent, probably your mother, that caused her to feel very insecure in terms of her own uh, knowledge or very insecure about thinking. And so she became a person who always had to be right and you couldn't contradict. And that's the Mercury Pluto. And in my case, it absolutely was the case. My grandfather built this house that I'm living in now, and she was living next door to her rich and really smart cousins. And she went from a school where she was the most popular to a school where she felt insecure, undervalued, not as smart, or because my grandfather was a plumber and their father was some important person. And so a lot of insecurities came from that. There's a lot more material to this, but you can do this like going back in history, degree for a year, go back, and you can even rectify the chart. If the year is off, then you know the degree on the ascendant is off. I'm just going to tell you this really quickly because since you mentioned Converse, I will tell you this is something, and I lecture on this and I give long stories, but it's something that I used to use sometimes when there was a woman had a Sun Neptune opposition, and I talked about something that happened to her father. I would come up with a year, say 10 years before she was born. And she said, well, that's when my father's father died, and he never really recovered from this. And he always seemed lost. But this was before I was born. And, I said, well, you can do a lot of things with astrology. It's not just when you were born. A lot of the traits or issues that you have are connected with events that occurred to a parent that become embossed on your own natal chart. I know this is complicated. You can kind of, as you work with charts, you can kind of look at it. If you have any questions, you can always ask me about this because I love regressing your chart into your parents' past. I know when it comes to the other house, cuz there was a man who had Uranus in Cancer in the sixth house. And back then he was a computer technician. He had his own business. And I said, and it was counting a degree for a year back in time when the seventh house cusp crossed his Uranus in the sixth house. And I said, what happened in this year to your father connected with employment that really made it important that you become self-employed in something where it's very Iranian. It's not like something that everybody else does, so you'll guarantee to have a good job. My father always believed that, your loyalty is to the company. You work for the company and the company will take care of you. He says, when my father was in his 40s, everybody was laid off and he was just devastated because it was very hard for him to get another job at that age. And he says the message was never work for the company, always work for yourself. So you can see where traits come from. And sometimes they're good traits. It isn't always something traumatic. And I know when my grandfather, 10 years before I was born, built this house, this is the house where I've conducted my career. If I say I've become famous in this house, not for being an astrologer, but I had the only farm in downtown Silver Spring, always in the newspapers and stuff like that. So we have big events and concerts here. So that changed for my mother while it was devastating for her. And you couldn't talk, you had to listen. You had to suppress that Mercury. Um, but it also was the good thing in terms of it's been a focal point of I guess, my dual career, farmer and astrologer. Okay, now I finished my talk or my spiel, so you ask questions.
Lynn, I'd like to see more of your house.
Um, I will send you the lecture I did in 2000 farm lecture. That's for you.
Okay,
And
because
you'll see pictures of the house and when my father was alive. Uh,
that's an amazing story to know that you're in that house that your grandfather built. That's a very strong tradition going back. I mean,
yeah.
I live in a house now that's built in 1873. It's got some
Whoa.
significance in the town, but it's not, and by one of the original master builders, and you can see the difference. The house that's built, this part I'm sitting in is, it's not going anywhere. It's had different, I can see a wall's been taken out there, and there's a few different things. You've got the fireplace on the other side, and the original pressed metal ceilings. But when you go to the back area, which was added on in the 70s, that's the area with all the problems.
Yes.
So it's like, someone did something a bit nasty. But it's, yeah, but so and this town where I live, all the old buildings are all stone. It's an old miners' town. So in Australia, it was probably the fifth largest town in Australia back in the 1840s.
Yeah.
And but then the gold rush happened, and they all upped and left and took off to Ballarat and to Bendigo and in search of gold. So all I mean, this place was, if you go down the street, um, people lived in what they called the dugouts. So people dug holes in the side of a creek bed, and 1,800 people lived in those holes, and then went off to the mine every day.
Wow.
So you talk. It's got a lot of history. So when you talk about that, and that you're still, in a house that your grandfather built, and that's your chart there, is it, Lynn?
And yes, and it was built when that ascendant regressed back to Mercury. That's when he built the house. And I'll give you another example of that.
Yep.
A woman had the sun in the 12th house, and and her time was really exact. When I regressed it in detail, it went back to September 1, 1939. That's when Germany invaded Poland.
Yes.
Her family was rescued by a Christian woman and hid in the barn until the war was over. And the message was with that sun in the 12th house, don't be too Jewish. I mean, my God, they named her Holly instead of, a nice Jewish name. They named her Holly. I said, my God, they couldn't make you Mary Holly. It couldn't be any worse than that.
The only thing worse could have been
So
Christian.
yes. And what it is it was don't be too Jewish because
Yeah.
something terrible could happen to you. Of course, it's very important for you to pursue those things, which she did. And she even went to Poland and found the family who rescued her family. And she says it was great. Revelation to her. It was so healing because she always resented Poland, but then she saw the rescuers and the people who did rescue her family. But that
Well,
sun in the 12th house is don't be too Jewish. Hide who you really are.
mm. Well, it's interesting, and look, you're using Placidus. I mean, Cheryl Ann, you're using a combination of both? Are you in doing PSM1 at the moment? Are you doing also Placidus and whole sign, or is it primarily whole sign that Ina's taking you through?
So Enid's using whole sign, and I also have primarily use whole sign.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. So, and
Well,
there's a
in medical and psychological, you really need to use Placidus because you're
yeah.
going to miss a lot of the issues. There was one chart, it was Mars opposing Jupiter, Mars in the 12th opposing Jupiter, intercepted and squared by Leo in the fourth house. A lot of those Leos, Saturn, well, all the bad ones. And a girl came to me um, and said, I just started dating someone, but should I continue seeing him? And I said, he has a lot of anger and repressed violent tendencies. You get rid of him right now. You are in danger. And it was because of that Mars intercepted opposing Jupiter, people who overreact to anything that's considered unjust or unfair. I had that aspect, but it's in air signs. Um, and she called me a couple months later and she says, I just got out of the hospital. Somebody called and said, you have somebody here with a package. She said, I went down there. There he was with a knife and stabbed me 13 times. Fortunately,
Well,
she recovered. So I couldn't have seen that without the interceptions. It just
yeah.
wouldn't have worked in whole. It's a different technique of interpretation.
I
It's
was
like
about yeah.
cosmobiology and Uranian astrology. There are different techniques that involve a different type of interpretation.
Yeah, and that's the thing, Cheryl Ann. It's you tend to stick with what you learn, and we are teaching whole sign because it also moves into things like horary and electional. There's traditional astrology, but there are merits in both. It's an interesting I'm trying to find that balance within the college where because what happens? People's natural thing is they stick to what they learn first. And I reckon, Lynn, you would have learnt Placidus first, correct? Correct?
Yes, but then I also using in some charts, I could use the progressed moon to rectify house cusps to see if those cusps were correct. And Placidus worked. And when I went to Germany for the first time after when the Berlin Wall was coming down, the astrologers there said Placidus works with secondary progressions or the cusps, whereas Koch works best with transits. And so the astrologers there would use Placidus, but then put if the Koch house cusp was a little different, they would put that in there and then watch the transit to the Koch house cusp.
Okay. So it's interesting. These systems all work. And then you throw yourself into Vedic, which is very interesting because everything's done by sidereal zodiac
Right.
and it means all the planets. So technically speaking, if you're talking about a Vedic chart or a Jyotish chart, Lynn's not a Virgo with the sun there. She's a Leo with the sun there. So, and yet by listening to you and what I know of you, you could classify as that Virgo rising with the sun in the first, which is a Leo tendency, or you could be Leo, how you come across.
So
But
it's just a
it's
different style of interpretation. You
totally
can't,
different style, though.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So there's no right or wrong. That's probably the best. What's probably what I'm trying to say. There's no
It's
right or
whatever
wrong.
you learn how to use and you use
Yeah.
those techniques. It was like with horary, I was using Barbara Waters' technique and then I studied Gil Navarro and I was trying to mix the two. And Gil says you can't mix two techniques. You choose the one you want to work with and exclude the other. And so I chose his, and that was able to even find a spy for Mossad.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yes. So whereas when I'm doing the astrology, say with horse racing, I tend to apply various techniques, but what I do is I use them independently of each other. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yeah.
So, in
Yeah.
other words, I don't often use, when I'm doing that, I don't often use whole sign, but I
Hmm.
do use midpoints a lot, which is a bit cosmobiology, and I look for angles and midpoints as trigger points.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of other things behind that. But so sometimes you do have to mix them. So what I think, Cheryl Ann, the takeaway maybe for you is that if you're doing medical down the track, that you might be using whole sign, but just get aligned to looking at things like what you just said, Lynn. Really important. Intercepted houses. Now I can vouch for it because I've got an intercepted sixth and 12th, and my intercepted planets are Moon and Neptune. Moon in Taurus, which is okay, it keeps me going, but that Moon Neptune opposition is a huge high sensitivity to a lot of things. So I relate to that quite considerably, and especially when you consider the upbringing I had with my family. So there's a lot to it. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents worth. But Lynn, I think this has been awesome. Any other questions, guys? Kai, you got any questions? Nope.
Nope.
Cheryl Ann? No? Okay.
No, that was a deluge of information, and I'm really
It
grateful
is a hell
for.
of a lot. I took some notes down from an immunity point of view. I've already looked up the planetary herbals liver cleanse because I like the idea of doing it in 18 hours and not over 3 weeks.
Well,
You
now
know,
the liver cleanse, there's well, I'll put down the Hulda Clark. That's the
okay.
one that's 18 hours. The
Okay.
other, which is Planetary Herbals, is just 4 nights a month. Should keep
That
your
sounds good to me.
liver in good shape.
Yep. So 4 nights, 4 tablets at just before you go to bed.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So
Okay.
I've seen that what I'm looking at is I'm looking for stuff I can buy here in Australia as well. So, and they do iHerb, which is you guys get, but also here. Is there any particular brand of things like ox bile and stuff like that? Because I've got a friend of
No.
mine, you've described 100%. He's a stuntman and daredevil. That's what he was. Um, and he's a Mars in Capricorn in the T square in the eighth house. And everything you've described about why he would need something like that, gallbladder, liver problems. He doesn't drink alcohol and has the liver of an alcoholic.
Okay.
So I was sitting there thinking, and also but he does drink a lot of sweet drinks and he loves his sweets because he's got Taurus rising.
Oh.
So
Oh.
I'm like,
Well,
and follows.
that might help him. People aren't going to do the extreme, even 18 hours. No, not going to do that.
Yep.
But the planetary herbals pills, pop a pill, um, and it's just easier to do. It doesn't take up
Yep.
any time, whatever. And I don't think it's all that expensive. but it has,
No, it's about 30 something dollars for about 120 or something. So it's not too bad.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
pretty good. And the ox bile, would that be something because I know for a fact he doesn't eat much in the way of vegetables at all. So he's on a very acidic diet. Would that be something he would take as well? Would you suggest?
No, the ox bile for his gallbladder, you take it with any food with fat in it because it will
Yes.
digest the fat in your stomach rather
Yeah,
than go to the liver
I
and
think that's a
gallbladder.
daily occurrence for him.
Um, but I learned that at the ARE, the Edgar Cayce organization in Virginia Beach. And so I just said, I take everything. If it
Yeah.
works, I keep it up. If it doesn't, I don't take it anymore.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you 100%. All right. Well, that sounds
Okay.
great.
Okay. I
Thanks.
will
Thanks, Lynn.
in the morning, I'll send you these 4 articles.
Not a problem. And I'll forward them
Okay.
on. Anyone who wants them, just send me an email. Okay, just as a
Okay.
reminder, and then I've got your email and I'll flick them back to you.
Okay.
Okay. All
All
right.
right.
Thanks again.
All
I'll
righty.
head off.
Okay.
All
All
right.
righty.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Let's see.
Thank you.
Bye.
I don't know how to stop this.